Thank you, my friends. And first, I will also say that it's an honor to speak here. And I will start by saying that I'm not an African expert. And my topic here is more about what type of political will we are having here in Europe to influence in Africa. I believe that I'm a very average European politician. I have made, during my career, few trips to Africa. I was 7 years as a Prime Minister of Finland, and then during that time I made maybe 100 or 150 trips and conferences, meetings all around the world, but only a few times in Africa. And it tells quite a lot. It tells quite a lot about the contacts level between Europe and Africa, about business opportunities in Africa, and so on. And that worries me. And in recent years, I have started more and more think about that how we can focus in Europe much more to Africa. And regular European politicians need to become interested in Africa. Africa is the question. It is maybe one of the biggest single issue of this century, in which the largest challenges of our time, climate change, population increase, terrorism, globalization, corruption, and poor management, lack of democracy, etc., are united. The challenges of Africa are known, but is there enough broad political will in Europe to act? And is there sufficient skill in Europe for building the kind of cooperation that will bring efficiency into our activity? It's a question of if citizens give their support for Europe to focus in a sufficient way on Africa's matters, and can the kind of political leadership be found that lifts Africa's issues to the front lines of politics in Europe? When I told people that I was coming here and asked them, also in Facebook, what subjects would be good to present here, I received useful observations, very much. People are interested about Africa. They realize that the challenges are actually increasing all the time. And for example, about the list which I got. First was, it has not been possible to limit population increase anywhere without electric lights. Education, the status of women and girls, clean water, the need for forestation. The EU and its member countries use vast amounts of money for development cooperation and distribute it to a large number of places without coordination. Each country has its own politics. This was one opinion. More children are born in Nigeria than in all of the EU. We do not set enough preconditions for our support. It would be good to replicate how many Asian countries have emerged from poverty. This type of examples people give. People have a good idea of the extent of the problems, but it should be said straight out also that some of the respondents felt that it would be good for us to concentrate on our own matters and let the Africans take care of their own problems. This demonstrates the political setup of today, in which, in one side, cooperation and isolation divide politics ideologically. It is unfortunately not clear if sufficient political will can be reached together in Europe and if the support of the citizens can be obtained for it. The EU recognizes all the challenges that Africa is facing. The most recent example of this was the high-level conference of Sahel on February 23rd. That was attended by heads of governments from nearly every EU country. 25 presidents or prime ministers from EU took part to that conference. The mutual dependency between security and development rose up in the speeches at the meeting. Many also brought up the necessity of good administration and respect for human rights in order to achieve stability. The conference was able to raise over 400 million euros in assistance for the needs for security forces. The problems of the Sahel have a direct link to the migrant stream heading into Europe. It is easy to see that there is a broad mutual political understanding for exerting influence on the reasons for the migration. In questions regarding immigration, this is nearly the only subject for which there is a sufficiently broad mutual understanding, at least on the level of principle. The Munich Security Conference is another example of the topically of the African theme. As part of the security matters in the conference background information, there was appended an analysis of Africa and African development matters. The report stated, the African century narrative appeared to be in full swing when African countries' financial resources peaked in 2012. Since then, they have been declining, and Africa's expected demographic dividend seems less likely to materialize. As the president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, argued, no wonder Africa's youth, our assets, take huge risks migrating to Europe. We must create greater opportunities for our youth right at home. If African countries fail to do so, for the approximately 20 million youths entering the continent's labor force every year, a ballooning youth population, deprived of quality education, gainful employment and political voice, could well lead to widespread unrest and destabilization instead of boosting productivity. When I was a schoolboy 40 years ago or more, 45 years ago, in my school we also celebrated the UN's population year in the beginning of 1970s. Its theme stayed with me. It was take care of the people and the population will take care of itself. This fact has worked everywhere, and it is also the clearest direction for Europe in relation to Africa. The great challenge for Europe is to create unified policy for matters connected with immigration and to seek out cooperation partners in Africa. In order to keep up political legitimacy for actions in EU member states in relation to immigration and Africa, the citizens need to see that the actions of the states and of the European Union must be well organized, following the rules, respecting human rights, and achieving results. In the 19th century, 50 million migrants moved from Europe to North America. Just like Staffan told us, even from Sweden it was about 1 million. It was a huge amount of people, 50 million people, and I believe that then the European population was something about maybe 200 million. At that time, America or USA, it was a land of future or land of promises. But nowadays, Europe cannot be the continent of the future for Africa in this century, but instead Africa itself must be made the continent of the future. This basic premise for action must be made clear in order for us to be able to commit everyone for the solution of perhaps the greatest question of our time. The development of the past decades in Asia can guide us in regard to what is also to be pursued in Africa. The main recipe is that private businesses must be involved. There are many reasons for the rise of Asia, but the utilization of globalization with the help of private direct investments is the greatest individual factor in the rise of Asia. International development assistance has naturally had an effect, but on adequate scale has been generated from investments. In the European conversation regarding development aid, in many countries, alongside traditional development assistance, there is emphasis on fund activity, in which minor public funds are used to entice private investors to become involved. Quite usually is that €1 of public money can start €9 of private money. Many who support traditional development assistance criticize this because private capital is not channeled into the poorest countries or the poorest areas. In this, they are right, but they cannot dispute the necessity of private investment. The resources of European businesses are not sufficient alone. European, American, and Asian businesses need to find Africa together and in competition with each other. In Finland, we have a government-owned Fund that strives to participate in investments that are especially directed toward energy projects, forestry policy, and food agriculture. They indeed say that the control of birth rates has not been achieved anywhere without electric lights. In my opinion, it has been able to answer the question quite well of how it is possible to direct projects toward the poorest countries. It is necessary to pay attention to the ability to invest. Earlier, I already described how financial resources have been declining during this decade. This is illustrated well by the fact that the oil income of African nations receiving income from oil have decreased to under half of the 2011 level. If the development cooperation policy of the EU and its member states would be created now, would we really establish 28 separate policies and common activity alongside these? Or would it be organized in some other way? The question is, does political will and leadership ability exist among EU countries which to increase coordination substantially? Is there also political will to let go of the ties of the old colonial period? The European Union is preparing now for a new 5-year period starting in 2019. Africa is to be raised up as one of the most important matters as part of the appointment of a new commission. And at the same time, a member is to be chosen into commission whose main area should be responsibility in also stated with this one word, Africa. It would elevate the importance of Africa matters in the work of the whole Union, and it would also help coordinate the work done by member states. A substantial part of this or his or her work would indeed be directed toward EU member countries. When I have asked around how the rise of many countries in Asia from poverty to growth was realized, the most times the answer is globalization and private investments. Official development assistance has had its own role, but foreign direct investments was the main driver. Development started after Japan rose up after the war. Investments then in Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong and South Korea were the start of development, which the current generation can see in the scope of world history. This Asian development model would already be happening in Africa if it were easy. The circumstances are different, but I believe that the same basic model is also most efficient in Africa, the combination of globalization and investment. The question needs to be posed as part of this: how can Europe create demand for African goods through trade policy? I'm not an expert in trade policy, and I cannot answer this myself. Also, the persons who are responsible for trade policy in the EU are not primarily thinking about the development of Africa, but have other priorities in mind. One question that divides EU countries is their attitude toward migration. This division has its well-known reasons. This division reflects the willingness of different countries to share responsibility for immigration. All are ready on the level of principle, however, to exert influence on the root reasons. A political will must be built from this common willingness in order to exert influence on a broad scale and with good coordination on African matters. It is important that as the member states prepare for a new 5-year term, they set Africa in a strong position in their own strategies. The European political parties are to raise the theme in the EU elections and make it priority when planning in such a way that the member states will also need to take a position on it. Thank you very much indeed.
I would like to thank Mr. Vanhanen for the very interesting speech and touching upon a very, very sensitive issue in such a clarity, because the relations of Europe to Africa and vice versa are not only in the economic field, they are also in the illegal immigration field, in the economic migration field. So it's a very complicated issue. And I would like to congratulate for the very exact and understandable positioning that has been made. Being such, I'm sure that there are certain questions, and I would like the lady from Africa to open the floor.
She's from the United States.
You are from United States? I apologize.
My parents are from Africa. I'm South American. Like Obama. So I wanted to ask, what exactly is Europe's response to China's growing influence and presence in Africa? Because the vast majority of the strong economic countries and the countries that are developing very well rely very heavily on China, more so than they do in the West. So what is Europe's response to this?
Yes, my last visit in Mozambique was such that I saw, or my guides, they saw some new highways and bridges and hotels, and then said that all of them have been built by Chinese. and he told that everything actually in Mozambique, which is really new and modern and in good shape, is made by Chinese. Of course, I'm not going to analyze what purposes or motivation China has to that, but the fact is that when I ask that where are European footprint in Mozambique, of course there are a lot, but nothing like what Chinese has made. So I think that of course we had to ask about what are the motivation behind China, but if they are doing more with more concrete and more than we are doing, then we should not have a reason to criticize them. So we had to compete with them. We had to compete with them and do our policy with our own model. So I actually welcome, as I said in my speech, I would welcome the American, European, Asian businesses to invest to Africa. And because when the Asian countries after Japan's rise, so this happened in 1960s and 70s, then it was mostly about Japanese, US and European investments to many Asian countries. Now there is a difference, because now also the huge Asian businesses can take part in Africa.
it seems that the Chinese are everywhere. They are in Lufthansa now. They bought the Piraeus port in Greece. So it seems that they are not only in Africa, they are in...
Yes.
So, another question. Yes.
The problem is that China has a surplus in the trade. You have surplus, but the United States has negative balance. If China will repeat the mistake of Japan, will bring this money to China, they will increase exchange rate, they will increase living standard in China, and they will get less competitive. But President Trump is doing, he is trying to violate that. China has no choice. It is obligatory to invest this money in these countries, even if they want, they will not earn any cent on those.
Excellent.
This is they have no choice.
Yes.
Because with the United States they have plus $300 billion. What to do with these dollars? To bring to China, they will destroy Chinese economy. Like Spain 600 years ago, importing gold, spoiled everything in Spain, etc., etc. You know, but well, I would like to know your thoughts on the following. You know, the balance of FDI now is negative for developed countries, and this is positive for developed countries. We have 3 trillion investments per year FDI. 2 trillion from poor countries are going to the rich countries, and just 1 trillion is going back to the poor. And the process, you know, these poor countries are getting exhausted. And after that, rich countries, they are obliged to think how to help them, to assist them. And they didn't succeed, and these people are coming to the rich countries. You know, you understand?
Yes. It's a vicious circle.
Huh?
It's a vicious circle.
Yes, and that cycle is not efficient.
Yeah, it's not
efficient.
yeah.
You know, like you feel like you feel the barrel without bottom. You know, what is your thought on that?
Yes, your both analyses, I think they are right. And the last second one, it only tells that capital, of course, want the best productivity, and it acts. The reasons are in that, and but I'm sure that, of course, we should not discuss Africa like a one continent because there are 53 countries. It tells quite a lot about an average European politician that if I should make a list of African countries, I couldn't do it exactly. I would probably miss many of the countries, but we are looking too much Africa as a one piece. It is not. But in Africa, I'm sure that because of the young working force, which they will have much more than any other area in world is having, they will get investments. But we had to push also from political side, because we don't have now too much time. It's actually time is going out quite soon. Already now we know, for example, about the migration which comes from Libya to Italy. 40% comes from one country, Nigeria. And so I can see that in some African countries there is already in the people's mind happening the same what probably happened in the 19th century in Europe, that they feel that yes, we can leave our country and go to somewhere else. And nowadays, in the time of Twitter and Facebook and all social media and information which we can get, this change in people's mind, it can happen really rapidly. That's why we don't have time.
From me?
Yes.
I know I'll have an opportunity tomorrow to offer my opinion on the
Can you introduce yourself, please? Can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, Moremi from Tanzania. I run the stock exchange in there.
No.
One of the comments from different people is that the challenge of Africa is basically the challenge of leadership. In your speech, you didn't mention much about that, but I would like to hear your opinion as to whether you have the same position.
Yes. Yes. I mentioned in the very beginning the lack of democracy and not good enough governance and so on. And these are, of course, the one basic reasons why, for example, to the foreign investors, Africa is not such or many countries are not such that the interest to invest is very high. I visited in Tanzania in 2010, I think, and I can't remember the prime minister's name who was then in Tanzania, but then we discussed a long time when we were moving with car to the next places, and I remember that very well, how he told that now they had then about 42 million people, and 90% are living in countryside, in rural areas. And when first tractor comes to rural village, it means that 9 of 10 jobs lose.
Yes.
And he said that they can offer a little bit in construction works in cities, but not very much. And how to create local jobs to small businesses and new jobs, it will be a big issue. And most of the time we discussed about especially young boys who lose the job in the farming village, what kind of risk there is for the radicalization. And you can probably tell more, but in Tanzania you don't yet have that problem, but probably you can agree that also you have that risk if you can't get some vision to the young generation.
A loud applause for Mr. Vanhanen.